Next up, we have Claire, who we haven't heard share in quite some time. She was off to the UK, and then this whole pandemic thing happened. And yeah, where are you joining us from tonight, Claire?
Well, I'm in Richmond in the East Bay of San Francisco area,
Awesome.
and I'm feeling really, um, as a singer, there's a kind of a standing joke, you never want to go on after Bonnie Raitt.
Sorry.
And I have such a different kind of vibe from the beauty that we've heard from, I think it was Nancy and then Carl, and I've got such a different kind of story. And I came across it today and I'd forgotten that I'd written it. And so it was so much fun to find it. And I've just felt so lonely, really painfully lonely recently. And for some reason, of course, this story just felt really, it just touched me inside in a sweet way. And so I'm sharing it with you from a place of adventure and wonderment. And I actually have not timed it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes, and wherever I am, that's where it ends. The story itself actually doesn't have the end written out. Is I've got it like in big caps at the bottom, what happens next and how it ends. But I haven't actually transcribed it. So we'll see. We'll see where it gets to. We end
Yeah, that's a great plan.
yeah. Okay. And it's not titled yet either. You might think of a title while you're hearing it. So here we go. Once upon a time, there was a heffalump, a great big heffalump. He was about 5 foot tall, with four big long legs that went all the way up his body. And on the end of each long leg was a great big foot, with four great big toes for eating with, and a great big tail that seemed to go on forever behind him. And at the end of this great big long tail was a beautiful fluffy blob of hair that was as soft as his great big heart. Sometimes he used it for dusting his nose or to whoosh away a stray fly off his great big body, because there were some parts of his great big body that were otherwise hard to reach. One day, this heffalump, whose name was Jake, realized that he didn't know what he looked like. He didn't know he had a great big body with great big legs and a great big tail and a great long neck with a wonderfully majestic head that possessed two enormously big brown kind eyes. So he walked slowly and gracefully to the nearest watering hole and took a peek at himself. He was surprised and somewhat intrigued. Whilst he was gazing into the water, he noticed a fly land on his side, and, as if of its own volition, his great big tail went whoosh, knocked the fly right off. And he watched the fly land again somewhere else on his great big body, and his tail went into action again. How strange, he thought. It's as if my tail's alive. I don't remember asking it to do that, he puzzled, wondering how it is that his body worked and managed to do all these things without his apparent permission or even instruction. Whilst Jake the Hufflump was considering these things of great import, he was distracted by a long, high sound coming out of the woods at the edge of the clearing. It was an awful sound. It was a sad sound that made his whole spine tingle and his hair stand up on end. It was as if each hair was saying, "Let me out of here. I can't stand this sound. It's too sad and painful." Jake decided to ignore the request of his hairs, and he began to walk over to the edge of the forest. Went the sound again. He stopped. It stopped. He advanced again. Went the sound again. He stopped. It stopped. He advanced again. This scenario went on for a good half hour, which I can tell you feels like an awfully long time when every hair is standing up on end, trying to escape your body. With Jake stopping every time the sound came out of the forest, until he finally reached the edge of the big, damp, dark, lush forest. For you see, this was a forest full of plants and big tall trees, bigger than heffalump Jake even, and lots of creatures that didn't even have names yet. It was a friendly place, but sometimes you had to remember that because you knew there was so much in there that you hadn't met yet. That's all. So it was a common reaction, this fear of the forest. Suddenly there was silence. All the creatures stopped buzzing in the undergrowth, and there was just this big, empty silence. Jake leant in, his head just touching the inside of the forest. It went again. He jumped out of his skin, but never actually moved an inch, because he was a big, brave heffalump. As he was determined to see what this sound was, it was so high-pitched. He stuck his head in just a little further and suddenly found his big, wet nose touching the small, dry nose of a rather flustered-looking porcupine. Went the porcupine. Ouch! Went Jake. That sound is so loud. What's the matter, porcupine? I've lost my family, he said. That's it.
I think that's a really fun device, actually. The to be continued, and then you have to keep telling the story, and it will incite you to keep writing it and finish it, and then you come back next time. Last time on story, Jake the heffalump had met the porcupine. We were left wondering if it would ever find its family again. Ah! Oh my god, I love this. Okay, give me those hands. Give me the hands. Give me the hands. Who's got hands? Linda. Do you want to give a reflection, or are you just giving me your hands because you're awesome? You are so good.
Just my hands because I'm awesome, apparently.
Apparently you are.
That's really great.
Does anybody want to offer a verbal reflection? Oh, I got so excited.
I'm just reading the chat. It's so fun to see what everyone's saying.
Yeah. It's really, the chat is, I should probably do a better job of reading the chat out loud in between. I think I have a little bit of a, like, I'm so much more interested in looking at your faces than I am looking at words, that I'm always over here. Dina will be trying to get my attention in the chat, and it's like, what? I'm over here looking at her face. Okay, I will read some of these.
I've got to tell you something.
Do it.
No one will know this. I have never made the sound of the porcupine. So
What?
I didn't know what he was going to sound like. That was so fun, hearing what he sounded like.
Oh, did anybody else have the reaction where at first you were like, oh God, no, but then you were like, she did that. And I was like, so, like, it hurt a little bit, and then I was just like really into it. I was like, yes, you go being a porcupine. Well, we didn't know it was a porcupine at the time. Who knew it was a porcupine at the time when it made the sound? No? Did anybody have any guesses, like initially, about what it was going to be based on the sound?
Is it a mouse?
A mouse. Yes, Safi.
Kind of is a mouse with very long, spiky coat.
So good.
I'm a natural. Oh, I thought it said naughty storyteller. You're a naughty storyteller.
Maybe next story.
Yes. That's your homework assignment. I want naughty stories next time. Yes, lovely and imaginative. Eek, says Carl. Yes, and I agree with you, Dina. I love hearing you read, Dina says. You could read anything and it brings me such pleasure. It's true. And Andrea earlier on was saying that she was enraptured. She was getting pulled in. And it does, Ellen, you're right. It feels like a lovely bedtime story.
My cheeks hurt from smiling. Thank you.
Oh, good. You inspired me. Can I tell you? I was like, oh my God, I love when you do the bedtime story thing and you have like this tone that you use. And I thought that it'd be much more fun instead of doing the introduction to story as like, well, we've been doing this for 4 years and I like you all. And Faith, you're up next. I'll shut my trap in just a second. But I was like, what if I did the introduction to story as a bedtime story? And like, really short, to the point, bedtime story. Think about it, get back to me. Faith, let's get a reflection for Claire.
Or you can also do naughty stories. I mean, either or.
Both.
Yes, I was just, it's so hard to both captivate an audience and read at the same time. And you just did it so effortlessly. I was so captivated and immersed in the forest that was friendly, but also very mysterious. And I absolutely think the story needs to keep going. I need to know what happens immediately.
All right, Claire is on. Sign up for next time. 2 weeks. To be continued.
Oh, bless you. I will. I'll finish it next time. Actually, it might have to be next time and the next time. It depends.
You never know.
We'll have to see how long it gets.
Thank you, Claire.
But thank you. Yes, thank you, everyone. And I, by the way, Molly, think you should do different genres every time you introduce it.
Oh, yes, that's even better.
Bedtime.
Yeah. Oh, this would be so much fun for me.
That's my 5 cents. Or is it 10 cents?
It's 1,000,000 cents, and I love it.
Right.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh my God, this sounds so fun. See, this is what I'm talking about.
Break.
Okay.
So let's
Take a deep breath in and get ready for Claire. Claire, we are recording and we can't wait to hear you.
Okay, this is not the beginning of the story. This is the second installment. There are a few of them, and it's about Jake the heffalump. So Jake has just stuck his nose into the thick forest and bumped noses with a porcupine who is very distressed because he's lost his family. Now this Jake could relate to, as he'd lost his family when he was very little and had grown up alone, adopted by the other creatures of the jungle and the prairie land. This news made him so very sad for the porcupine. How did that happen? He asked. I don't know. We were all just playing hide and seek and I hid so well that they just couldn't find me. And then, well, they just gave up and they left without me. Forgetting that they hadn't found me yet. And you see, they found everyone else and not me. And then, well, because I waited so long, I just curled up and I fell asleep. And when I woke up, they were just gone. He curled himself up again. And in a big, big effort, emitted one more extremely loud, long and painful that practically knocked Jake off of his own big long legs with the big long feet. It was so loud. Porcupine was so terribly sad because he thought that the people who loved him had left him. And he was afraid of being left alone, even though they didn't really mean to. But he was in a lot of pain, you know, so that's how it kind of goes sometimes. But luckily, Jake understood this and suggested to Porcupine that he hop up on his back and that they go looking for his family together. Since Jake had such big long legs, it would be easy for both of them to have a much better view than for Porcupine on the forest floor, all on his own. Plus, it would be fun. The forest was full of delights, and just a few dangers, but not nearly as many as some people make out. As they entered the forest, they were surrounded by wonderful, rich lattice of sounds, and they marveled at them. There were birds flying high overhead, monkeys swinging through the trees on long, reedy ropes, small creatures rustling along the ground, and loads of ants marching to and from their homes, building nests and homes for their large, extended families. And the leaves. So many leaves, all of different shades of green, red, brown, yellow, and gold, and so many different sizes. Boy, it was busy in the forest. much different from where Jake normally spent his time, by the watering holes in the middle of big open expanses of dry earth under a languorous, blazing hot sun. Here was so different. Green, moist, damp, with sunlight glistening through the trees wherever it can find a hole in the canopy, and so much activity. It was cooler here too, and everyone moved around a lot quicker. Apart from the snakes. They seemed to be happy to take their time, sliding through the undergrowth with their rich, slender, slithery, smooth, scaly bodies. They walked for a while. Porcupine happily atop Jake the Heffalump's long back, and when they came to a small clearing surrounding a beautiful lake full of really large fish. They were orange and yellow, and there were even some green ones. They were swimming around happily and seemed to notice when Jake and Porcupine reached the water's edge and bent down for a quick drink. All this walking was hard work, even with only such a small passenger. 3 of the fish came over and poked their heads out of the water, right by Heffalump's nose. "What are you doing here?" they asked. "We're looking for his family." Jake turned his head to the left and up, indicating to Porcupine on his back. "Come down, Porcupine, and have a drink," said Jake. And with that, Porcupine slid down Jake's back, which he conveniently lowered to help Porcupine be nearer the ground, and ran around to the water's edge to drink alongside Jake's rather large head. He was a rather small porcupine. And to talk to the fish. That's the next install.
So many leaves.
Yes.
I had to close my eyes as you were describing the busyness of the forest to really allow myself to see it and smell it and feel it. Thank you, Claire. For those of you just joining, welcome, Anna. We're gonna have Claire come back to finish this bedtime story for us. Well, not finish, but give us the next installment, at the end of the night. So anyone want to try to use the reactions button to raise their virtual hand and say a few words about Claire's story? It's so great. We're using the chat a lot more. And do you remember, for those of you who used to come to Story in person, the reflections were just flowing, right? Like you just were so drawn physically to the person who had stood up that it almost like pulled something out of you. And it's so different in this forum. I was actually talking with Wendy about this recently, about like, how much of a pause do you leave? And does it feel awkward if no one wants to verbally reflect? And is that okay? You know, all of the things it brings up in us that we get to be curious about. So yeah, something I want to explore and continue to explore and play with in whatever future iteration of story ends up manifesting. But Wendy, hit me.
I was just going to say that took me back to being a child listening to tales of Winnie the Pooh. Just fabulous. Like I could see everything so vividly, and the characters are so just beautifully developed, and you know, come on, the like who can't love that, right? So thank you so much for sharing again.
Thank you, Wendy.
It's really fun to, you know, there's weeks and weeks that span between the times where we gather, and you're planting these seeds and then you're reaping them in the future, you know, and we get to experience that time shift that you take us on. Thank you, Claire.
You're welcome. It's really, it makes all the difference to have people to tell, like to share the story with. It makes it so much more alive. So thank you.
And then that as just a nod to community in connection, right? The story of our lives, the story of each moment, the story of where we are in the here and the here. Clare, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll see you again in a little bit at the end of the night. All right. Now, without any further ado, not part deux, but part deux for tonight.
Part deux for tonight. Oh, thank you for the opportunity to get all of this recorded. So, just in case we need reminding, Jake and Porcupine are having a bit of a drink at the lake inside the jungle, and the fish are quite close watching them. So Porcupine looks at them. "Have you seen my family?" he asked, somewhat forlornly. The fish looked at each other and shook their wet, slippery heads. "Oh no," they said. "What do they look like? Do they have tall, long spikes like you?" "Yes," he said, feeling somewhat self-conscious at this observation. For you see, porcupines don't much like too much attention on their looks. They're rather shy little creatures at the best of times, let alone when they're in the middle of a crisis. He caught his own reflection in the water's mirror and proudly but secretly rather enjoyed his long spikes. They were clever, you see. As they lay down along the body, nice and smooth and sleek, until they were alerted to a danger. And then, suddenly, the spikes went whoosh up, like flags up a flagpole, and stuck out in all directions. A bit like Auntie Flo's hair when the hairdryer had gone out of control. Except the porcupine spikes are pretty sharp, not soft and fluffy like Auntie Flo's silvery hair. Anyway, since he wasn't feeling in any kind of danger, his spikes stayed close to his skin, and he paid more attention to the fish wagging their big tails in front of him, back and forth, left and right, just under the water, whilst they managed to maintain themselves in a perfectly still, upright position, their heads never moving. Not one jot. They were quite serene and hypnotic, their colours vibrant and loud, their mouths opening and closing, ever so rhythmically and slowly, almost in unison. Their eyes held his own and Jake's, and they just kind of communed for a while. It was nice. Something seemed to pass between them that felt calming. Porpoise was about to repeat, "They look like me, except slightly redder, at least his sister was. And my dad has a few silver streaked spikes," but he hesitated. Because before he'd even said the words out loud, the fish all looked at him and said, "Really?" It quite shocked him. He hadn't spoken yet. "Well," they continued, "we think we may have seen them heading that way." And they pointed with their long wet noses towards a small pathway that was lined with big yellow flowers and big yellow shiny leaves. And with that, Porcupine looked at Jake, who happily lowered his head so Porcupine could climb up past his nose, along his neck, and rest himself squarely in the little nook between his shoulder blades. And off they went. Jake was happy for this distraction and for the company. Truth be told, heffalumps sometimes got bored, even though they tend to like their own company, but Jake was different. Being a little bit of a younger heffalump, he found himself sometimes yearning for a wee bit of fun and a bit of company, someone to play with. And Porcupine, granted, was a wee bit smaller than he might have imagined as a suitable companion, but nevertheless, he was quite peculiar and fun. And, well, he was here, now, and sometimes being here now is the best place to be, even if it doesn't look quite like we'd imagined. So Jake decided to learn more about Porcupine. I'm going to stop there.
Claire, it's like, Clara, it's like so much is happening. You've just you bend time. It's like all of that could have happened in a blink of an eye or in 20 days. You're just playing with the time-space continuum, and we're
Wow.
there with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Anybody else for a little bedtime story reflection? Yeah, it's more upbeat than bedtime, but I feel like it's coming in. The porcupine heffalump continuum. Yes.
Ooh.
Yes, turkey vulture.
I see python cannabis.
Yes, Ellen, go for it.
I love the way that you're telling the story. I love that I can see everything. Like I could see those fishies under the water and they do that. They really do that. So it tells me how observant you are as a person, because then like it's really easy to see it. I could see him crawling up his nose. Like it was great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I can't wait to hear more.
Thank you.
So yeah, and then the idea that the fish are wagging their tails. It's his it's their voice, right? And it reminds us that we're all describing the things that we're experiencing through our own lens, right? Oh, of course, we're going to anthropomorphize, but no, they're being anthropomorphized, and then they're self-morphizing whatever they're doing. Lisa understands what I'm saying. Yeah, Claire. Awesome.
I just also want to,
Awesome.
again, I have to say this because it's really important. It feels really important to me to know that this has traveled, which is that there has to be someone to give it to. There has to be a receiver. Otherwise, there's no journey, right?
Yeah.
It could just be words then, but the fact that there's a presence here of community, as you say, Molly, makes a reason to have a story in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give a 2-second recap for those who haven't heard any of the story and those who have, but it was so long ago. I think I was another generation. We have 2 characters, central stage. We've got Jake, the heffalump, who's large. He's a baby though, but he's still quite big. And then we've got Porcupine, who, as you can imagine, has spikes. Jake was having a drink at the lake pond. He hears the sound, gets curious, goes to the forest, sticks his nose in, and this horrendous sound is coming from a tiny little porcupine. And this part's important because of what happens next. Porcupine was very, very sad, seriously sad, because he'd lost his family playing hide and seek. So now I'm going to set my timer. Okay. Jake decided he wanted to learn more about Porcupine. They're sitting by a pond with great big fish in it that they've been talking to. Porcupine, he began, do all porcupines play hide and seek? Or are there other games that you play? Oh gosh, Porcupine replied, fit to burst with excitement. And other good games to share. And by the way, now completely distracted from his earlier sadness, as he too was rather enjoying this unusual and unexpected company. Oh no, hide and seek is just one of them. It depends which part of the jungle we're in. If we're near a lake, then sometimes we play pretend to be a plant, and we all pretend to be plants. And Heffalump Jake thought this sounded most odd, but did not want to hurt his new friend's feelings. "Oh," he said, "that sounds fun." Porcupine, missing completely his friend's tolerant tone, added enthusiastically, "Would you like to play? Would you? Would you?" Jake said slightly resignedly, "Okay," and pulled over to the far edge of the lake that they had now reached. Porcupine jumped off Jake's back, slid down his outstretched leg, and landed with a quiet thud on the slightly hard ground. Undeterred, and head spinning just a little, Porcupine swiftly ran to the side of the lake and stood bolt upright, hands in the air, with a rather strange look on his face. "Are you all right?" asked Jake, slightly concerned. "Yes, of course I am. I'm being a flower." "You must go away. Stop drawing attention to me." Jake sloped off and found his own spot next to the lake, within earshot of Porcupine, and also stood up on 2 legs. Apparently this was being part of a flower. Or rather, apparently this was part of being a flower. He raised his wobbly trunk in a salute and held his ground as still as possible, wondering what should happen next. Out of the corner of his eye, he looked across at Porcupine for a clue, but nothing. Porcupine was just standing there, as still as a statue. Thought Jake. This could last a very long time. If we're both being flowers, then who will find us? Before he'd even had a chance to enter the silence that occurs after a very profound and wise question such as this, they both heard the most almighty scream. A scream so piercing, so high-pitched that the forest shook. Even the leaves turned away to protect their ears. Poor Jake's ears, so large and sensitive, curled up around his face in an effort to keep the sound out, rendering him momentarily blind and disoriented. As he peeked out, he saw Porcupine dash into the foliage, spikes flat against his back, thwacking from side to side in a rather ungainly attempt to run fast. "Porcupine! Come back! Don't go near that sound, it'll kill you." However, Porcupine knew that sound all too well. It was his little sister. His family had been playing one of their many other games on the far side of the bushes, and she had gotten hurt. And you really don't want to hear the sound of a hurt baby female porcupine. Not at all. It's designed to scare people off whilst she tries to recover her composure and tend to her wounds all at the same time. A very disarming sound indeed. That's your 5 minutes of the next installment. Oh, cancel. There we go. Has Molly frozen again? I think she might have. She's gone to another dimension. Here she is.
Hi. I'm going to say if anything happens to me for the remainder of the evening, just plod on. Do you know what I mean? Just dance on into the sunset. You all have been here before. Ray, you got the hang of this. Well, you know what I mean? Like, whatever. I'll make my way back. People will fall off. They'll come back. We'll bring a friend. It'll be fine. This is the part where we do reflections. And you can see some of the reflections already in the chat. Yes, we all want more calling out, I'm being a flower. And if we're both being flowers, who will find us? So a lot of good stuff in the chat. And Wendy, you want to share a verbal?
Yes, I will. I thought that was delightful. Thank you so much for sharing that. There was so many wonderful things in it that I kept jotting down, but pretending to be a plant is just a hysterical concept. And of course, everyone loved them. Even the leaves turned away to protect their ears. Your metaphors just really bring me into the story. I feel everything that's happening. I know what's, going on, and emotionally I'm along for the ride. And a very disarming sound indeed. That's a great ending, and I can't wait to hear more. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, Olga.
Claire. That's how I felt listening to your whole theatrical presentation. I was like a little 5-year-old in Magic Land. It's like so hypnotic, and you're so into it, and the pauses and the suspense. Your joy just ignites my joy.
Thank you, Olga. I love telling you guys stories, this one especially.
It is a delight. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Claire. And we are going to start with you, my dear. And Claire is going to be tying off this wonderful series of installments that she's been sharing. And I will hand it over to you to take us.
Thank you. I have mixed feelings now. I feel a bit sad. This is the end of the story. We've all sat through episodes of Jake's adventure. For the benefit of those who have not yet met Jake, I will briefly recap, because we only actually have 2 paragraphs left. But Jake is a heffalump. He's quite young. He likes company. He was a bit lonely. He heard a big screech coming from the forest. He went to the forest, stuck his nose in, and came face to face with Porcupine. Porcupine being a very sad being. He'd lost his family playing hide and seek. So they travelled through the jungle-y forest together on the search for the family. At the end of the last installment, there was a massive screechy sound on the other side of some bushes. So Porcupine went running through the bushes. Jake was rather terrified by this, saying, no, that sound will kill you. And because it was a very disarming sound indeed. As Jake charged through the foliage, trying to catch up with Porcupine, he came upon a sight to behold, and had to brake very, very hard to avoid running them all over. There were not just 1, but 2 families of porcupines playing croquet with an army of ants. And he wasn't entirely sure who was winning. Porcupine's sister was surrounded by some very kind plants who were trying to soothe her wound with their soft blue leaves, filled, of course, with their magical forest medicine, cooing at her to soothe her upset. She let a tear out when she saw her brother, Porcupine, for that actually was his name, running to her side. "Porcupine, where have you been? And who's that following you?" In her fear, yet another scream, "Eee!" emerged from her tiny mouth, inconceivably loud and high for such tiny stature. And Jake again had to wrap his big soft ears around his big round soft face. "Please let it stop," He himself shrilled, but in a lower, heffalumpy kind of way. Porcupine's sister could tell from Jake's kind but harried voice, she was rather astute in these matters, that he was actually a potential playmate rather than a threat, and she immediately rolled on her back, inviting him to tickle her tummy with his trunk, which he promptly did. She giggled, and Jake, quite frankly, was relieved, because the sound of her giggle was many decibels lower than the sound of her scream, as was its pitch. His ears smiled. Porcupine's family came up to Jake and did a rather unusual little dance, padding on his toes with their paws, being very, very, very careful to keep their spikes lowered, as a way to share their thank yous with him. An ancient porcupine ritual heard only and very rarely in the quiet whispers of the forest. Intuitively, Jake knew what this meant, and he smiled at their kindness, for he knew that now he too had found some new playmates and a whole forest to get to know. Dee-dee.
Oh, thank you, Claire.
I love sharing this story with you, all of you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Does anyone have any reflections? You can use your human hand or you can use your little icon hand. Emily.
Oh, Claire, I'm so happy and grateful that I was able to catch the end. I missed, I think, one previous installment. But I just want to say thank you for the softness of that story. I needed that in my day today. And from the textures, thinking about the little porcupine, their soft bellies, and Jake's wrapping his big ears around his soft face, and just the story of connecting and having something maybe be different than what you thought it might be. It's just really special. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily.
Sandra.
Oh, so all day I've felt like a child. I've giggled and took pleasure in everything that came my way. And this is a perfect ending to the day because I giggled even more. And hopefully I can feel like a child tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank
Laura.
you.
I'm pretty addicted to the Calm app. I don't know if you know it, but they have these sleep stories, and all these different people tell stories. And I'm very particular whose voice I will listen to, because some are just grating and others are just so inviting and lovely. And yours is one of them. And your voice just felt so warm and embracing and sweet. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm trying to capture some of the awesome reflections in the chat, and I'm not fast enough. So, dun-da-da, ta-da. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, reflectors.
There's one more. I see Rich.
Oh, Rich, hi. You're the one who used the actual technical hand, and I was technical hand blind. So sorry. You know what they say? You scan for what you. This is a great example, actually. I'm going to take this moment because this is a big deal. Notice what I did. I was scanning for the thing I expected to happen. I was scanning for the thing I expected to happen, and so I did not see the thing that was actually happening. The reason I think this is such a big deal is we do it all the time. We decide that the people in our lives are the way they are. And so we scan and we look for them to prove us right. We scan our lives for proof that the stories we're telling about where we are and who we are and what we are true. And so we don't see what's actually happening. We're only seeing the proof that our stories that we are creating are correct. And they're not always in our best interests. So thank you, Pa. He's my dad. Thank you for using your tiny orange hand. And it helped me illuminate a point that is dear to my heart. So tell us, what did you think of Claire's story?
I'm the little old guy who's different than everybody else, so I obey instructions.
You're really good.
It's my way.
You're doing a great job.
I was gonna say quickly, but very gently transported by this story. Thankfully transported, because it took me to a place that doesn't often exist in my life, where things are gentle and things are articulated clearly and things are simple and things are loving and things have at least a resolution that's at least partial within the telling, if not predicting a greater resolution later. And I think that's the essence of all good. I don't know what the category is, but all good animal-based storytelling, maybe. Is that a category?
It is now.
Because by telling an animal story, we can extract human dynamics and play with them in a way that we wish the human dynamics would mimic, maybe. I did not expect to be here in this place, and this is totally new, and I am loving it. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Rich.
It's
so yummy to get all this love. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Yeah, the love feels pretty gosh darn good. Wendy, do you want to continue